Hi guys, and welcome back to tutorial number 4 for these Bucilla Felt crafts. In this episode we're going to be doing the back stitch, and I'm also going to show you my loop start method when you're stitching with an even number of strands of floss. So in this case we're going to stitch with 2 strands. Got my coffee, I'm settled in for a nice day of crafting. I even have my stitching buddy over here taking a nap. She's not very helpful, but at least she's company. So for the loop start method, you're going to separate out 1 strand of floss. So this is just 1 strand folded in half. So you can see this is why they call it the loop start. There's a loop where it is folded in half. So you're going to take both ends and you're going to thread the 2 ends through the needle. If I can thread a needle today. Maybe, maybe not. I should be using a threader. Alright, so you've got both ends through, and with this method you don't have to tie any knots, which is much easier. So the longer end has the loop, and then I'm going to let the 2 ends be the tail. So then when you go to start stitching, you're going to come up through your felt. And again, I'm not worried about the back on these ornaments. So otherwise I would try to hide it under and come in that way, but because I'm not worried about the back. So you're going to pull through, but just don't pull all the way through because you want to make sure you leave a loop. And then I'm going to go down through, and see how I'm coming through the loop? And then you're just going to pull it tight. And that's your loop start. Much easier to do it this way. Alright, so this is the back stitch. Now that we've got it started, I'm going to show you the finished back stitch. It's a little different than the outline stitch that's normally used. So you can see it's just a little bit different of a look. You can kind of see it up close there. Okay. And the instructions sort of show you how to do a back stitch. They don't really show you in action, but it kind of gives you an overview of all the different stitches. So this is how they're suggesting you do the back stitch. I know that it's more efficient to go up where your next stitch is as you're coming down, but I try to make it really, really, really perfect, so I don't always do it that way. So I'm going to show you how I do the back stitch. Hopefully you guys can see it's focusing good. Alright, so we've got our loop start. The only thing you have to watch with loop start is that you don't come up and go in your loop when you make your next stitch, because that will just pull it out. In which case it's not a big deal, you just have to restart your piece. So I'm going to come up, and I try to come exactly on the line, as close as I can get, because your goal is to cover these stamped lines with your stitching. So I'm going to come up, and then I want to go down exactly where my other stitch went in. So you can see I'm going down through the fabric exactly where that other stitch ended. And then you're going to pull through. Make sure you don't have any dog hair from your stitching buddy in your crafts. And then you're going to come up. Again, it's much slower to go all the way down and all the way up. That's just how I do it. So I've come up in a spot that I like, and then I'm going to go down exactly where this other stitch ended. The key to making a really nice back stitch is to go slowly. The key to these crafts in general really is patience, but it's especially important when you're stitching to not try to rush it, because things get sloppy, the thread tangles. It never fails when I'm trying to get a piece done quickly. My thread gets all knotted and it's a big mess. So, anywho, my plan for this piece, it always helps to have a stitching plan before you try to do any of these components. My plan is to stitch all the way across, and then I'll jump over here, stitch all the way across, And I know from doing the other one that I'll probably run out of thread at that point, and then I'll start a new thread and do this piece. So I come up here. Don't be afraid to make your stitches small. The bigger the stitches, the harder it is to keep them neat. I know it seems like it would be easier to do bigger stitches, but most of the time they just end up getting sloppy. And if your thread catches, just move it to the side. And again, you want to really try to cover those lines. So it helps to take an extra second and just make sure you're coming up exactly where you want to keep the lines covered. So the other method of back stitching, I'll show you quickly. You go down where you want to go down, and then you come up exactly where. So you can see this is how the instructions show to do it. You finish one stitch and you stitch all the way through, and you can already see, this is why I don't like to do it this way, you can already see my needle is a little bit crooked here and my stitch is going to end up crooked, possibly. And then you would pull your needle all the way through. You can see how that it's just a little different. That stitch I just did just bubbles a little funny. And then you would go down right where the other one's finishing and come up where you want your next stitch to start, just like that. Again, that's not how I do it. I'm just showing you, full disclosure, and you can see kind of, it's really important when you're going to do it that way, your needle has to be perfectly straight, because you can see those stitches, those last few that I did, are kind of crooked and they're kind of wonky. So I prefer to do it this way. This is my method for contrast. I come up and I go all the way down through, and then I come up where I want to come up. And I just think it lays nicer than these bubbly ones when you try to go speed up the process. Patience is a virtue. And again, I'm really not pulling this thread tight. I'm just pulling it tight enough to finish the stitch. If you go too tight, it really starts to bubble the felt. And that stitch wasn't placed perfectly. If you don't like the way it's placed, you can kind of squish it a little and straighten it out. And again, not pulling too tight, just tight enough. I'm going to finish this piece off, and then I'll show you how to put the sequins on.